1.2, it says refer to information A and B. Use the table provided in the answer book to calculate the following. The correct closing balance of the debtors control account on the 30th of September 2021. Indicate changes with a plus for an increase, minus for a decrease, or a 0 for no change. The correct amount owed by the following debtors only: A. Barnes, C. Davis, and E. Foley. And that is 18 marks because it's 9, 9. That is 18 marks. So, but we are required to refer to information A and B. So let's then go to our information A, still on page 4, and then information B is in the following page, which is page 5. Right, information A, we are told that the balance on the 30th of September 2021, before taking into account errors and omissions in information B, debtors control account, the balance is 228,000. This was given in the answer sheet for the debtors control balance. Debtors control balance is 228,000. Right, and then extract from the debtors list. A. Barnes is owing us 13,500, is given in the answer sheet, and then C. Davis owing us 25,000, and E. Foley owing us 18,300. Right, the following errors, remember we are doing debtors reconciliation. Reconciliation comes from an English word which is to reconcile. You are correct. We are doing corrections here. We are correcting errors. So the following errors and omissions must be taken into account. Number 1, Roman figure 1, an invoice. There is also source documents. It is important that the learners should understand source documents. Like for example, if we talk of an invoice is issued when we are selling on credit. Selling on credit. An invoice will be issued when we are selling on credit. A credit note will be issued for returns and allowances. Returns or allowances. If, for example, a debtor is not happy with the certain goods that were sold to him or her and is returning those goods for some reasons, then a credit note will then be issued by the business. So a credit note will then be a source document for the returns or allowances given to our debtors. A receipt will be issued. A receipt will be issued when we receive payments from debtors. When we receive payments from debtors. When these people are paying us, we will then issue them with a receipt to indicate that we have received their payment and therefore we have credited their account. So it is very important for students to familiarize themselves with these source documents, because the transaction will then be talking about these documents, and you need to be clear that if they are talking about the invoice is issued when selling on credit, credit note is issued for returns and allowances, and receipt is issued when we are receiving. And EFT, you need to also know EFT, this is referring to electronic fund transfer. When the debtors are paying us through EFT, we will then issue them with a receipt. You know now that in the previous years, we used to be talking of checks. So now the checks are no longer in existence, so we are now talking of EFT, which is electronic funds transfer. You can transfer using your cell phone, or you can transfer using your laptop. Right, so the first one, which is the first transaction under information B, it says an invoice for 1,750 issued to A. Barnes was not recorded in the books of Zigzag Traders. So we issued an invoice for 1,750, and now you have an understanding that if we issued an invoice, it means we were selling on credit to this person. So we sold goods on credit to A. Barnes. So can you see now it's very important to understand the documents, because there is no statement which is telling us that we were selling. We are just told that we issued an invoice. So But because we understand that invoice is issued when we are selling, we have a clear understanding that we sold goods to the value of 1,750 to A bonds, but that was not recorded. So then we need to go to our credit debtors control account. So we need to add. This is our debtors control. This is our debtors control, the account that controls all the debtors. So it means we need to add 1,750 here. We are adding 1,750, and then in the personal account of a debtor, which is A bonds, we need to add 1,750 again. Another thing that is very important for students to understand is that the debtors control account is the account that controls all the debtors. So if the transaction, we are told that the transaction and the debtors ledger, the debtors list, this list is coming from the debtors ledger. So the debtors ledger deals with the personal accounts of debtors, and the general ledger is having the debtors control account, which deals with all the debtors. So now all this information that is recorded in the general ledger and even in the debtors ledger is taken from the subsidiary journals. So if then the transaction is telling us that this was not recorded at all, it means that if I can just draw a table which will make one understand. We have our journals. We have our journals, and in this case when we are selling on credit, we have our debtors journal. When there are returns or allowances, we have our debtors allowances journal. When we receive cash from the debtors, we have our CRJ. These are our books of first entry. Each and every transaction that takes place in the business, it has to start here. And then after that, the second step is posting. The posting will then be, we will then post this information to debtors ledger, where we will have personal accounts of debtors. Debtors ledger will have personal accounts of all our debtors. And then at the end of the month, we will then post to the general ledger. At the end of the month, we will post to the general ledger, and the general ledger will be having debtors control, the account that controls all the debtors. And what is it that is posted to this account? Normally we are posting totals here. We are posting totals, but to the debtors ledger we are posting on daily basis, daily transactions. Daily transactions are posted to the debtors ledger. So there is something that I need you to understand here, because we are having this debtors control account, and this is coming from where? This is coming from the general ledger. And the general ledger is dealing with what? With totals. And we are having this debtors list, which is coming from the debtors ledger. And the debtors ledger is dealing with daily transactions. Daily transactions, not totals. Daily transactions. And we are focusing on each and every debtor. These are personal accounts of our debtors. And what we are saying at the end of the day is that the total of the debtors control balance should be equal to the total of the debtors list. But in this activity, we are not given all the debtors, so we will not be able to balance to see if the total of the debtors, because it's like when you are telling people that are owing me, they are owing me 20,000. That's the debtors control balance. And if one will then engage you further to say, give me the list, then that person will be requiring the debtors ledger, where you will be then saying, I have CBC owing me 5,000, I have Mkhize, but the total of that list should be giving you the same total as the control balance. If it is 20,000, it is 20,000. But you are not going to be able to prove that in this activity, because we are not giving all the debtors. We have just, this activity has only selected 3 debtors. But I wanted you to understand this diagram, because we are doing corrections. that if a transaction was not recorded here, it means that when you are doing corrections, you should touch your debtors ledger, which is this one, and you should also touch your general ledger, which is this one, because it was not recorded at all. But let's say the transaction was recorded in the journal, but was not posted to the personal account of a debtor. It means that if it was recorded here, the total that will be transferred to the general ledger will be the correct total. So it will mean when you are doing corrections, your corrections will only be in the debtor's ledger. So you must understand that the transactions they started, that is why the first transaction is affecting both. It is affecting the general ledger and also what? The debtor's ledger, because it was not recorded at all. It is not in the journals. And as it is not in the journals, it means it was not posted to the debtor's ledger, and even the total is not there, is not included in the debtor's control column. But let us look at the second one. So that is why this 1,750 was added in the totals here in the control account, and was even added in the personal account, because it was not recorded at all in the journal. Number 2, a direct deposit of 2,000 by e-Foley was correctly recorded in the journal. So let's look at this one now. It is saying that there was a direct deposit of 2,500 by e-Foley, which was correctly recorded in the journal. It was correctly recorded in the journal, but incorrectly posted to the account of e-Forged, another debtor, in the debtor's ledger. So the mistake was in the debtor's ledger. If it was correctly recorded here, it means that the total that was transferred to the general ledger, to the control account, was correct, because this was correctly recorded in the journal. And hence we are saying this transaction will not affect the control account. So there is 0 here, because we are told that this direct deposit of 2,500 was correctly recorded in the journal. It means if it was correctly recorded in the journal, the total of the journal is correct. The only mistake they made, it is when they are doing posting to the debtor's ledger. So it means the correction must be done only in the debtor's list there. What is it saying? It says that a direct deposit of 2,500 by e-Foley was correctly recorded in the journal, but incorrectly posted to the account of e-Forged, another debtor, in the debtor's ledger. And this was a direct deposit. This person was paying. So it means we need to go to his account. This person has paid. That's minus 2,500. If we had this debtor that is mentioned here in this transaction, who is e-Forged, another debtor, we would go to his account and add. But it is not given here, because we are told that this payment was recorded in his account. So we assumed as if e-Forged is the one paying, of which the correct person who was paying us was e-Foley. So if e-Forged was here, we would minus from e-Foley and go and add it to e-Forged. So transaction number 3. Number 3, the total of the debtor's journal, 62,500, was incorrectly recorded as 65,000 in the debtor's control account. Remember, we said the debtor's control account deals with the totals. So the mistake is only here. It deals with it, so it does not affect the debtor. So we are not going to touch here in the debtor's ledger, because this transaction is talking about the total. So it says here, the total of the debtor's journal, which is 62,500, that's transaction number 3. The total is 62,500, was incorrectly recorded as 65,200. Let's calculate the difference. That's 65,200 minus 62,500. That's 2,700. The total of the debtor's journal, 62,000, was incorrectly recorded as 60. It was extra. We recorded it with an extra amount of 2,700, and therefore we need to take it out. Minus 2,700. We recorded 65,200 instead of 62,500, because the transaction is telling us that the total of the debtor's journal, 62,000, was incorrectly recorded as 65,200. So if you calculate the difference between 62,500 and 65,200 is 2,700, So we need to subtract 2,700. All right, number 4. Merchandise sold to C. Davis 3,500 was treated as a return of goods and recorded in the debtors allowances journal. So it means the mistake started here. It started from the journals, which then tells us that it means even in the debtors ledger it is incorrect, and even in the general ledger. So this transaction is going to affect both, because the mistake was done in the journal, in the book of first entry. So we are told that merchandise sold to C. Davis for 3,500 was treated as a return. So it means this merchandise was supposed to be added, but it was treated as what? As a return. We subtracted instead of adding. Where is C. Davis? We subtracted instead of adding. So it means now when we want to correct this, we need to add 3,500 twice. 3,500 twice, or just 7,000. We always say this, that because we subtracted instead of adding. It's merchandise sold to C. Davis, and even same thing is going to happen, because this the mistake was made in the journal. Even here we need to add 3,500 twice, or just 7,000. 3,500, 3,500, that's 7,000. We can make just a practical example on this one. Let's say you are owing me 100 rand, and then I sell to you another goods for 50 rand. It will mean that the amount that you are supposed to owe me is 150. But when I'm supposed to add 50 rand that I sold to you, I make a mistake by subtracting. I'm treating this transaction as if it is a return. So it will be minus 50. Your balance will end up being 50 rand, of which the correct balance is not 50 rand. The correct balance is 150. So what do I need to do if I need to correct this? I need to come back with 50 rand, add 50 rands twice, because if I add it only one, the balance will be 100 rand, of which is not the correct balance. The correct balance is 150. So the first 50 rand is cancelling the wrong entry made, and then the second 50 rand is giving you the correct one. So then the correct balance will be 150. So that is why we are adding this 3,500 twice. Right? And why is this transaction affecting both the control and the debtors ledger? It is because this mistake was made in the journal. Right, transaction number 5. 5,200 received from D. Klein, a debtor whose outstanding balance was written off 6 months ago, was recorded in the cash journal as a receipt from a debtor. That's a debtor D. Klein. Unfortunately, we do not have D. Klein in the debtors ledger. But here, in the totals, this will affect us, because this mistake was made in the cash journal. It was made in the journal. So it's affecting the control and the ledger. So the mistake that was made here is that 5,200, which was received from D. Klein, a debtor whose outstanding balance was written off, was recorded in the cash journal. We recorded it in the cash as if we are receiving cash from a debtor. Remember, when a debtor is written off, when that money is recovered, it does not go to debtors control account. There is a separate account that we need to open, which is bad debts recovered. So by subtracting again, that will be a double subtraction. So what do we need to do here to correct this entry is to add 5,200. We are adding 5,200 here. That's transaction number. That is transaction number 5. Yes. Transaction number 5. We are adding 5,200. This 5,200 was not supposed to have been recorded in the cash journal. Remember, in the cash journal, it is where we record when we are receiving cash. And it was not supposed to have been recorded under debtors control in the credit, because this person had already been written off. So when he comes back, he should be entered elsewhere. There is a special account where this person needs to be recorded, which is called bad debts recovered. So that is why we are adding. By adding this 5,000, we are cancelling that minus 5,200 which was made by recording it in the cash journal. Right, transaction number 6. Merchandise returned by A. Barnes was recorded in the relevant journal as 250 instead of 700 and posted accordingly. If the mistake was made in the journal, it means it affecting post, because the posting to the debtors ledger and the general ledger comes from the journals. So merchandise returned by A Barnes was recorded in the relevant journal as 250 instead of 700. So it means when this data returned merchandise valued of 700, we only subtracted 250. 700 minus 250, let's check. We have robbed this data in amount of 450, so we still need to go to his account and subtract 450, because the messengers returned was not 250, it was 700. We should have subtracted 700. So because the mistake was made in the journal, so even our total might be wrong. So that is why we are also even correcting it here in our control account by subtracting 450. Merchandise returned was valued at 700, but we only subtracted 250, so we need to subtract another 450. Right, transaction number 7. An EFT for 7,850 received from E. Foley as part payment of his account was entered correctly in the relevant journal, but no entries were made in the debtors ledger. It was entered correctly in the relevant journal. An EFT of 7,850 received from E. Foley as part payment of his account was entered correctly in the relevant journal, but no entries were made in the debtors ledger. So it means this transaction is not going to affect. This transaction is not going to affect our control. The reason is that this 7,850 received from as part payment of it was entered correctly in the relevant, but no entries were made in the debtors ledger. It's only the debtors ledger that we use to do the debtors list. So we need to subtract 7,850 here. 7,850. Why is this transaction not affecting the control account? It is because we are told that this was entered correctly in the relevant journal. So it was entered correctly here, so we assume that the total that was transferred to the general ledger is correct. The only mistake they made here was not to record it in the personal account of a debtor. So now what we need to do, we have come to the end of the errors and omissions, so we then need to calculate the final amounts now. So let's go to this one. We have 228,000 plus 1,750 minus 2,700 plus 7,000 plus 5,200 minus 450, 238,800. 238,800. Please make sure that your calculations are correct. Very important to calculate correctly. Let me just verify again. Plus 1,750 minus 2,700 plus 7,000 plus 7,000, right, plus 5,200 minus 450. Yeah, that's the correct. Let's then calculate C-Davis here. C-Davis, you have 25,000 plus 7,000. That's 32,000. And E. Foley, you have 18,300 minus 2,500 minus 7,850 equals to 7,950. You have A. Barnes, you have 13,500 plus 1,750 minus 450, 14,800. Right. So we have done our calculations. Now we are then now proceeding to the age analysis, which is C. our age analysis. If you go back to your question paper, we are done with question 1.1 and question 1.2. So we now want to do question 1.3.